The morning it happened, I almost didn't open the door. I remember standing in the kitchen, listening to that particular silence, the kind that doesn't feel like peace, but like a held breath. The savanna outside my cabin window was still too still, and something in the back of my chest told me the world was about to shift. I had been a ranger at the reserve for nearly 12 years. I had learned to read the silence the way others read words, every absence of sound carrying its own sentence, its own warning. But that morning, the silence was different. It wasn't the silence of danger. It was the silence of something waiting. I set down my cup and walked to the door. My hand rested on the latch for a moment longer than it needed to, and then I opened it. She was sitting 3 feet away from me, perfectly still, the way only a cheetah can be still. Coiled and calm at the same time, like a storm deciding whether to move. The early light caught the black tear marks running down her face, and I felt my knees go soft beneath me. I knew those marks. I had memorized every line of that face years ago, in a different life, when she was small enough to hold in both arms. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. I just stood there in the door frame, my heart slamming against my ribs, trying to convince myself that what I was seeing was real. It had been 7 years since I had last seen her, since the day I opened a transport crate in the middle of the reserve and watched her walk away without looking back. I had told myself that was the best ending, the only ending worth hoping for. But she had come back. Her amber eyes held mine with an intensity that I had no language for. There was no aggression in them, no fear. There was something far more unsettling, something that looked impossibly like recognition, like she had traveled a very long way to find exactly this door, exactly this face, and she had known all along that it would be here. I lowered myself slowly onto the step, the wood cold beneath me, the morning air carrying the dry scent of grass and dust. My hands were trembling. I pressed them flat against my thighs and forced myself to breathe evenly, the way I had once taught myself to breathe around her when she was small and frightened and the world was too loud for her. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. She watched me settle. Then she did something that broke whatever fragile composure I had left. She lowered her head, just slightly, in that way she used to do when she was a cub testing whether a thing was safe. It was a gesture so specific, so achingly familiar that a sound escaped my throat before I could stop it. Not a word, just a sound. The sound a person makes when something they buried comes suddenly back to the surface. I don't know how long we stayed like that, facing each other across those 3 feet of red earth. Time felt irrelevant. The reserve hummed quietly around us, the distant cry of a bird, the dry whisper of wind through the acacia, but the world between us was completely, utterly still. It was as if the universe had paused to witness something it understood better than either of us. She had found me. After 7 years of wilderness, after learning to hunt and survive and live entirely without me, she had found her way back to this door. And as I sat there with tears blurring the edge of my vision, I understood with absolute certainty that she hadn't come back for herself. She had come back because she had something to show me. She wasn't supposed to survive. That was the first thing the veterinarian told me when they brought her in. A bundle of spotted fur no bigger than a house cat, trembling in the bottom of a cardboard box lined with an old shirt. Her mother had been killed by a snare 2 kilometers from the reserve's northern boundary, and she had been found alone, dehydrated, her small body already beginning to give up the fight. I remember looking into that box and feeling something lock into place inside me. Something fierce and certain that I didn't fully understand yet. I took her home that same night. I wasn't supposed to do that either. There were protocols, facilities, a whole system designed precisely to prevent the kind of attachment that begins when you spend the night on a cold floor next to a dying animal, willing it to breathe. But I was 29 years old, and I had not yet learned how to follow a rule that felt wrong in my bones. So I stayed beside her, and she stayed alive. And by morning, we had already made each other a promise neither of us could put into words. I named her Saba. In the language of the land, it carried the weight of something ancient and enduring, and it seemed right for an animal who had survived what she had no business surviving. She was a fighter from the very beginning, stubborn and bright-eyed, with a personality that was all contradiction, fierce and tender, wild and impossibly gentle. She would press her forehead against my knee and purr in a way that vibrated through the floor, and then 10 minutes later she would shred the leg of my field trousers with the focused intensity of a surgeon. The months that followed were the fullest of my life. I learned her rhythms the way you learn the rhythms of someone you love. When she was hungry, when she was restless, when she needed space, and when she needed closeness. I watched her grow from that trembling, hollow-eyed cub into something breathtaking, lean and powerful, her coat deepening into gold, her movements becoming the fluid, impossible grace that only a cheetah possesses. Every milestone felt like a gift I hadn't earned. Every morning she was still there felt like borrowed time, because I always knew it would end. That knowledge lived inside me the entire time, quiet and constant, like a stone at the bottom of still water. Saba was not mine to keep. She was never mine to keep. My job, the real job, beneath all the feeding and the bonding and the sleepless nights, was to prepare her for a world that would not be gentle with her. I had to teach her to hunt, to fear the right things, to trust her own instincts over the sound of my voice. I had to make myself unnecessary. There is no lonelier work I have ever done. The day of her release, I kept my hands busy so I wouldn't have to feel them shaking. I had chosen the site carefully. Deep in the reserve's core, away from human corridors, rich with prey, I opened the crate door and stepped back. The way you are trained to do, the way you practice doing so that when the moment arrives, your body obeys even when every other part of you is screaming to reach out and hold on. She walked out slowly, paused once, and turned her head toward me. Those amber eyes, that calm, unreadable gaze. And then she walked into the long grass and disappeared. And I stood there until the horizon was just horizon again, with nothing of her left in it. I told myself it was the right thing. I told myself it every day for 7 years. And standing there on my doorstep that morning, looking into those same amber eyes, I understood for the first time that she had never stopped being part of the story. And neither had I. I don't know how long I sat on that step before I heard them. It was a sound so small I almost dismissed it. A soft, dry rustle in the grass to Saba's left. The kind of sound the wind makes when it moves through the lower stalks. But Saba wasn't looking at me anymore. She had turned her head, slowly and deliberately, toward the tree line, and something in the precision of that movement made the air leave my lungs entirely. They emerged one at a time. 3 cubs, no older than 10 or 12 weeks. Their spots still carrying that faint, smoky haze of youth, their legs uncertain on the uneven ground. They moved in the hesitant, front-heavy way that very young animals move, all effort and no elegance. And they stopped at the edge of the grass, bunched close together, studying me with enormous, cautious eyes. I pressed my hand flat over my mouth. I don't know if I was trying to hold in a sound or hold myself together. Saba watched them for a moment. Then she looked back at me. That gaze, measured, deliberate, carrying something I had no scientific framework to contain, held mine for what felt like a very long time. And then she did something I will spend the rest of my life trying to find the right words for. She stood, walked to the nearest cub, and nudged it forward with her nose, the way a mother does when she is teaching her young that a thing is safe. The cub stumbled toward me and stopped, perhaps 2 feet from my knee, sniffing the air with a concentration that looked almost comical on such a small face. I didn't move. I barely breathed. Every instinct I had as a ranger told me to maintain distance, to respect the boundary between wild and human, to not reach out, and every other part of me was dissolving. One by one, she nudged all 3 cubs forward until they were arranged in a loose, uncertain cluster at my feet, their small chests rising and falling, their eyes moving between me and their mother. She was introducing them to me. I know how that sounds. I know the arguments against it. Projection, anthropomorphism, the very human need to find meaning in animal behavior. I had made those arguments myself, in lecture halls and around field campfires, with the quiet authority of someone who had spent years learning not to blur that line. But I was there. I felt the weight of what was happening settle over the morning like something physical. And I'm telling you, with everything I have. She was introducing them to me. I lowered my hand from my mouth. I let the tears come, because there was no longer any point in holding them back. The smallest cub took one more uncertain step and sniffed the toe of my boot, and I made a sound that was half a laugh and half something that had no name. And Saba, my Saba, the trembling cub from the cardboard box, the animal I had loved and lost and quietly mourned for 7 years, sat down in the red dust and watched me meet her children. The savannah held its breath around us. The acacia trees stood motionless against the pale morning sky. And in that impossible suspended moment, I understood that the wild does not forget. It does not forget the hands that were gentle with it, the voice that spoke softly in the dark, the person who chose to let go even when letting go felt like breaking. The wild carries those things forward, the way water carries light, invisibly, faithfully, across distances we cannot measure. She didn't stay long. I think I knew she wouldn't, that this was never meant to be a homecoming, not in the way I might have once dreamed of in the quieter, more selfish corners of my grief. Saba had not come back to return to me. She had come back to show me something, and when the showing was done, the wild would call her home again. That was as it should be. That was always as it should be. She gathered her cubs with the unhurried authority of a mother who has never doubted herself, a low sound in her throat, barely audible, and they came to her immediately, stumbling and jostling against her legs. She stood for a moment at the edge of the grass, her body half turned toward the tree line, and she looked back at me one final time. I have tried in the years since to describe that look to people who ask. I have never fully succeeded. It was not goodbye. Exactly. It was something older than goodbye. The look of a thing that is complete, that has done what it came to do and carries no unfinished weight. And then she turned, and the grass folded around her and she was gone. The cubs disappeared after her, one by one, swallowed by the same golden silence that had held them moments before. I sat on the step for a long time after that, unable to move, unable to think in any linear way. The sun had climbed higher by then, burning the last of the morning cool from the air, and still I sat, staring at the place where the grass had closed behind her. I have worked with wild animals for most of my adult life. I have seen extraordinary things, acts of intelligence and loyalty that science is still learning to fully account for. But what Saba did that morning exists in a category I cannot file neatly alongside the rest. It was not instinct in any conventional sense. Instinct does not cross 7 years and untold kilometers of open savanna to find a specific door. Instinct does not pause and look and choose. What she did required something the textbooks have not yet agreed on a word for. Something that sits in the uncomfortable space between memory and love. In the weeks that followed, I found myself thinking about the day I released her, about how certain I had been that letting go was the end of something. I had mourned her like a conclusion. I had folded her away into the past tense of my life and tried to leave her there. The way you leave something you cannot carry. But Saba, it turns out, had never put me in the past tense at all. She had carried me forward into her wildness, into her motherhood, into the most important morning of her life. And then she had brought that morning to my door. There is a question I'm asked often now, by researchers and journalists and people who simply hear the story and need to make sense of it. What do you think she was trying to tell you? I used to deflect the question with careful professional language about the limits of animal cognition. I don't do that anymore. I think she was telling me that the kindness we offer to the vulnerable does not vanish when we stop witnessing it. I think she was telling me that trust, once built with patience and gentleness, does not erode with distance or time. And I think she was telling me in the only language available to her, which was the language of presence and gesture, and those 3 small spotted faces looking up at me from the red dust, that what I had given her had been worth something, that it had mattered, that she had lived a full and wild and beautiful life, and she had wanted me to know